So there you have it, folks. My Licorice is alive with a short a cappella ditty that just popped out of my head and flowed through the portals of my clarinet, and it's newly named the Corona V Blues. It's my 12-bar musical ode to the otherworldly moment we're all living in. Anyway, folks, I'm here on lockdown in my movie studio apartment in the Wood of the Holly under the sign that overlooks the enchanted land of La, except La La Land, like everywhere else, is more like a ghost town. It's like, well, it was hit by one of those 1970-era neutron bombs. You know, the buildings and the landmarks are all untouched, but the people, the folks, are nowhere to be found. A trip last night across the town revealed a naked city. Streets normally clogged with folks are now deserted. Restaurants, movies, clubs, sporting events all shattered. At Gelson's in my neighborhood, the shelves lay bare, but the aisles were jammed with folks pushing shopping carts piled high with paper towels and toilet paper. So with my mask and swim goggles affixed firmly on my face, I decided I'm out of here. I headed over to some of my favorite ethnic markets, little off-the-wall places scattered on the fringes of the Wood of the Holly. First, I hit a cool Indian place over the hill in Atwater Village. I picked up a 10-pound bag of basmati rice and stocked up on roti, which is a tortilla-like pancake with the thickness of a French crepe. Throw that little Indian delight on my cast iron pan for a few minutes, and it goes really good with an egg in the morning. After that, I dashed over to my fave little Armenian market. The place has great vegetables and some canned eggplant and vacuum-packed jars of hummus and tahini and thick blocks of smoked Gouda cheese and homemade sour cream, plus a healthy offering of Central Asian grains and spices. So I filled up my blue IKEA shopping bag and headed home, where, as I always do, I parked myself in front of my computer, and I noticed online that there was a very long line around a gun shop in Culver City. Apparently, and I had no idea about this, guns and ammunition, when properly administered by a trained caregiver, can kill the virus or anyone who has the virus, or more importantly, anybody who is standing in line in front of you to score more toilet paper. I didn't see that recommendation on the CDC website, but hey, it must be true because the lines are around the block. I just thank God we have the Second Amendment when we really need it, like when panic is in the air. See, those little Corona Vs, well, they remind me a lot of that Mr. Mayhem dude in all those Allstate TV commercials. Wherever he goes, trouble follows. And as of right now, that Mr. Mayhem dude is having a grand old time. He's got most folks hunkering into a kind of survival mode. And as for myself, well, I'm channeling my inner grizzly bear and going into late winter hibernation mode. My instincts are just get in my cave and wait this thing out, and when I'm hungry, crack another container of top ramen. Adapt and survive. Survive and adapt. That's my mantra, and hopefully not go insane while I do it. But as our orbits diminish, so do the opportunities for Mr. Mayhem to spread his misery. See, viruses have one mission and one mission only: to replicate. And in order to replicate, any virus worth its salt needs an unknowing host. And it's when that human host is ignorant and happy and symptom-free that Mr. Mayhem can do his dirty work. So I guess the prudent thing is for all of us, even those of us who feel good, to lock it down for the time being. Let that Mr. Mayhem marinate in his own juices with no place to go. Let that Mr. Mayhem just live in his tent under a freeway. Then Mr. Mayhem will do what masters of mayhem usually do. They dissolve into nothingness and disappear. Or at least they go away for a while until the smarter folks come back with the vaccine. At least I hope so. Until then, I guess we all just need to breathe and be brave. We've got to hunker in our bunker and just stay cool. Might be time to start reading novels again or start practicing that piano again. For myself, I really need to get my head inside all those jazz scales on my clarinet. Or maybe the time is ripe to turn off all those stupid apps and computer programs and video games and start that brilliant novel you were supposed to write after you got out of college. You see, behind every misfortune lurks an opportunity, and I'm just trying to find it. As for myself, I recently performed my civic duty, and last weekend I did some serious social distancing. I loaded up my trusted blue Subaru and bolted out of the wood of the Holly. The freeways were gloriously empty. Who knew? The Corona V is the best thing that happened to traffic. La La Land is a post-apocalyptic paradise. Anyway, I spread through the valley, then winded my way through Las Virgenes Canyon. And just a mile or so past the freeway, I slowed down and craned my head to get another look at the Kobe crash site. The hillside where the Mamba met his maker was finally cleared of investigators and had turned lush green thanks to the recent rains. Funny how the new tragedy nullifies the previous one. The present has a curious way of burying the past. Anyway, I wormed my way through the canyon until I arrived at my favorite hang of all hangs, that being Surfrider Beach, Malibu. There was a nice little 2 to 3 foot swell peeling off the point and hardly anybody on it, just a few intrepid wave riders. But today, I really wasn't there for the waves. I had my big board, my 11'4" Jerry Lopez SUP in tow, so I changed into my swim jammers and a rash guard, fixed my GoPro to my hat, and paddled out into the big blue. I dipped my carbon fiber paddle into glassy conditions and tooled my way over a line of incoming swells past First Point, and then up through kiddie bowls, then finally past the big row of rocks that marks the beginning of the fabled Malibu colony. Far from the madding crowd I was. The water was calm, the air was still, and the glassy seas of the Santa Monica looked like a skating rink from Palos Verdes all the way out to Point Dume. It was perfect paddle weather. Pelicans glided above me, and some curious cetaceans kindly offered me a visitation from below. Everything on, under, or above was happily oblivious to the drama that was raging on land. After I got up past the colony, I sat there and ruminated and looked out to the west and watched as the Santa Monica mountains tapered gently to the sea. And then I flipped a Yui and down breezed it back from whence I came until I got past the pier. Then I right-shouldered a Coast Guard buoy and headed towards the seaside sushi hang of Nobu, which, curiously, was empty. And so was the Soho House, a high-end shishi private social club that sits right next to it. Not a soul to be seen anywhere. All was quiet and serene. And that's when it hit me. No more normal. The world had changed. If Nobu and the Soho houses were vacated, life as we know it was, for the time being at least, frigging over. Then I paddled under the pier before I made landfall back at Surfrider. Back in the parking lot, I was comforted by a handful of familiar faces. There was my buddy Boyd. He's got tattoos all over his head and is a liveaboard right now. And by liveaboard, I mean he lives out of his car, which is all painted up just like his head. Boyd's a hairdresser. He cuts hair, and he loves to surf on his thick, foamy board, but that day he had set up a canvas chair, and with his scissors and clippers arranged on the hood of his car, like a true professional, he was open for business in the parking lot. He had a shaggy-haired lady surfer client, and she sat there as her boyfriend happily observed the whole goings-on. So good on you, Boyd. You're keeping hope alive. Anyway, where was I? Oh, yeah. Well, it wasn't long after that the weather turned foul. The wind came up, so I headed to the nearby Malibu Whole Foods market to resupply. But the local folks in Malibu were taking no chances and had cleaned the shelves. For my part, I was able to grab the last bag of frozen farm-raised scallops, so at least my pasta will be tasty. After that, I dashed home in time to catch the Biden versus Bernie show. Wow, let me say this. The political environment over the last few weeks has morphed completely. What just a few short weeks ago was a full-on Democratic demolition derby has been reduced to a two-person drag race. It seemed like just almost another age when I was milling among those rallies and caucuses of Iowa and the rural precincts of South Carolina. But that night, in deference to Mr. Mayhem, the debate was held in a germ-free CNN bunker. For his part, Bernie, and I'm switching metaphors here, seemed to me more like Joe's loyal sparring partner. Sure, Bernie landed a few uppercuts and at times peppered Biden with some jabs, but basically I got the feeling that Bernie was just prepping Biden for the main event that comes in November. And Joe will need to be in top form to knock out the PVP, by that I mean Putin's vice president, from his rent-free residence over at 1600 Pennsylvania. And if there's any justice in this world, the PVP will get evicted from the White House and after a short interval get a one-way ticket into the big house. But, hey, I'm just fantasizing. Of course, the main topic in the debate was how to deal with Mr. Mayhem. My feeling is right now, test kits and ventilators and a viable vaccine would benefit us way more than all the tanks and jet fighters and aircraft carriers that we have standing by ready for action. And maybe, I don't know, just maybe it's time to start thinking of human health not as a commodity to be traded like pork bellies or oil futures, but as an individual right for each of us and a collective responsibility for all of us. Now, for his part, Biden offered up a reassuring presence. I mean, let's face it, the guy's been around. He knows where the levers are, where the ghosts are buried, and how the sausage called legislation is made. And he said if he was president, he'd get all the best folks down in the Situation Room over at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue and get things done. By that, I mean he'd kick Mr. Mayhem's holy ass. And for his part, Bernie said he'd also get the folks and scientists in the room and also beat the shit out of Mr. Mayhem. But Bernie was very vague about which room he'd assemble those very best people. Maybe in the Lincoln bedroom, or perhaps in the Roosevelt room. My point is there's a lot of rooms over at 1600 Pennsylvania, and if Bernie's going to get all the best folks in one room, I'd like to know which room, and so would those best folks right now. We need some follow-up on that. But maybe it really doesn't matter, because what was clear to me after South Carolina is now very clear to everybody else. It's time for Bernie to fold his tent and jump aboard the Biden train. So, where was I? Gee whiz, whiz-gee. Sometimes I get lost in my own ramblings. Of course, well, this new moment we're in offers up some very special challenges. For myself, firstly, no more orbiting in the Uberverse. I don't want to be a rolling Corona V-vector, so that gig is over for the time being. And as for love in the time of coronavirus, the present moment, well, it offers up some new challenges. You used to be concerned with who folks slept with, but now you have to worry about who they shook hands with or who they walked past on the street or if the wrong person sneezed on them in the supermarket. The pillars that had previously sustained our happiness and sanity are shaking mightily. As for me, no more swim team, no more comedy performing, no more acting gigs. Not that I was scoring anything lately, but to be sure, at least the auditions are no more. But at least the podcast industry is still clicking, and I'm still here in front of my microphone gabbing away, if not for your benefit, at least, well, for my sanity. And lastly, I'm also trying to navigate a life without sports. No Lakers. No more Clippers. I can't see Steph Curry now that he's back off the disabled list. I can't see him on TNT. And those Dodgers spring training games vanished. All of which really makes you have to face down the vacant spaces in your own life. That is a challenge, to be sure. Anyway, folks. For what it's worth, that's my take. Till next time, this is your rebel without applause, breaking it down joke-wise, truth-wise, and virus-wise. Till next time, namaste, shalom, and aloha. Nama Shaloha.